Everyone in the world knows who Giannis Antetokounmpo is now. The two-time MVP, the Finals MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year, the unstoppable force who dropped 50 points in a closeout game to deliver Milwaukee its first championship in 50 years. The face of a franchise, the global icon, the living blueprint of what happens when talent meets obsession. He didn't just become great. He forced his way into greatness through work, grit, and a refusal to stop climbing. But the part people forget is how unlikely the story really was. Giannis didn't come into the league polished or proven. He wasn't a college sensation. He was not a March Madness hero. He was a skinny teenager from Greece with a frame that looked interesting, a skill set no one could fully define, and a background most scouts barely understood. He walked into the draft as an idea, a project that might work, and nobody, not fans, not analysts, not executives, truly believed they were looking at the future face of the NBA. Because before Giannis ever touched the stage, 14 prospects were seen as better, stronger, more NBA ready. Front offices spent months convincing themselves that they had him ranked correctly. They believed that he was just way too raw, too thin, too much of a risk. They believed in the names that filled college highlight reels. They believed in the established scorers, the decorated freshmen, the polished prospects. And Giannis watched every single one of them walk across that stage before him. Some of those players became starters, some of them became role players, and some even became champions. But most of them faded out of the league before anyone even had the time to process what went wrong. Their careers took every shape imaginable, from heartbreak to reinvention to quiet consistency. And each one of them tells a different story about how unpredictable the NBA really is, because no one saw what was coming. But all of that is what makes this story so special, because before Giannis became the Greek freak, before he became a champion, 14 men were chosen ahead of him. This is their story, and how a kid taken 15th became one of the greatest players of all time. This is the story of the 14 players drafted before Giannis Antetokounmpo.
With the first pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers select Anthony Bennett of Toronto, Canada.
And honestly, that whoa told the entire story. Nobody had Anthony Bennett going number one. Not fans, not analysts, not even half the players in the green room, because Anthony Bennett wasn't the projected top pick, not even close. But here's the thing that people forget. He wasn't some no-name, and he definitely was not a scrub. At UNLV, Bennett was one of the most physically gifted forwards in college basketball. He was strong, explosive, and powerful. A 6'7" wrecking ball who could step out and hit a jumper. He averaged 16 points and 8 rebounds as a freshman and did it with a mix of finesse and force that made scouts raise their eyebrows. He looked like the prototypical modern forward before we even knew that they existed. But being intriguing is very different from being NBA ready. And that was the true tragedy of Anthony Bennett. He needed time. He needed development. He needed to go somewhere patient. Instead, he was announced to the world as the #1 pick of a franchise in turmoil. And the second that word left the commissioner's lips, the clock on his career started counting down faster than he could ever keep up with. Now that would stress me out, so that's why I'm partnering with MH1 to try to become a winner. As most of y'all know, these videos take a lot of work, and procrastinating is like my worst enemy. I'm eating right, I'm sleeping right, but focus has always been my biggest problem. Y'all know how it goes. You sit down at your desk, you check your phone, your emails, text, social media, and then you just get distracted. So I added MH1 into my daily routine, and it's actually helped me stay more consistent and clear-headed throughout the day. What I like about MH1 is definitely how subtle it is. I was a big energy drink guy, and with MH1 there's no need for me to drink it anymore, and I'm sure my heart will thank me. I mean, let's be honest here, it's stimulant free, there's no buzz, there's no crash, it's just that kind of calm and focus that you need to work. I kid you not, most of these scripts that I have to write for these documentaries take me weeks, and with MH1 it's helped me get a lot of work done each day. It's an easy daily habit. It's literally just 2 capsules a day, and I've seen a lot of people say the same thing, where it helps them stay clear-headed and entirely cut out that 3rd cup of coffee. You don't need it anymore, trust me. I mean, the packaging is clean, like it feels premium, you know? And they even have a subscription where it gets delivered to your front door each month. If you want to try it out yourself, be sure to go to the description down below or scan the QR code on the screen and save 25% off your first order for US customers. Major thanks to MH1 for sponsoring today's video. What nobody outside the teams knew was that Bennett entered the league dealing with a list of physical problems that would break most rookies before they even stepped onto the court. He had asthma, sleep apnea, shoulder surgery, conditioning issues, and a lingering pain that never quite went away. And this was all while trying to carry the weight of a title that he never expected. The Cleveland Cavaliers wanted upside. What they got instead was a young player already buried under expectations that were impossible to satisfy. His rookie season was unfortunately brutal. He averaged 4 points and 3 rebounds, shot 35%, and struggled to find his rhythm rhythm in a role that he was never ready for. Those numbers weren't a reflection of effort or desire. They were the reflection of a player overwhelmed physically, mentally, and situationally. He struggled to breathe during games. He battled fatigue. Every missed shot became a headline. Every air ball became a meme. Every night felt like he was playing under a giant spotlight that he never asked for. And in the rare moments that he finally got something going, something small would go wrong and the pressure would reset yet again. It wasn't just that Bennett didn't play like a #1 pick. It was that he didn't have a chance to be anything else. The world had made up its mind before he even adjusted to the speed of the league. And after his rookie season, Cleveland decided to move in a different direction, and Anthony Bennett was included in the Kevin Love trade. Minnesota became his first real chance at a reset. There were stretches where he looked noticeably better. His body was lighter. His confidence seemed to flicker back on, and he finally had room to play without the weight of being a #1 pick hanging over every single possession. But even in Minnesota, the progress always felt fragile. A minor injury would pop up, a bad week would linger longer than it should, and the momentum he built kept slipping right through his fingers. Toronto came next, and on paper, it should have been the perfect situation. He was back home, surrounded by support, playing for an organization that was known for developing talent patiently. And just like in Minnesota, there were moments where things actually looked promising. He hit shots, played within the offense, and showed flashes of the versatile forward scouts fell in love with at UNLV. But again, the consistency just never quite held. One night of rhythm rarely turned into two, and the internal battle with confidence continued. Brooklyn offered what might have been his best chance at a revival. They gave him a clear structure and a defined role as a floor-spacing forward off the bench. And again, for a brief stretch, Bennett genuinely played well. He was hitting threes, rebounding well, and looked like someone who could carve out a niche in the modern NBA. It was the closest he came to truly turning the page. But just when it felt like he had finally been stabilized, the same issues that haunted him from the start resurfaced. Conditioning setbacks, nagging injuries, and the mounting pressure of trying to resurrect his career all caught up with him yet again. By the time his run in Brooklyn ended, the confidence that once powered him as a college star had eroded. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, until the joy that made him so dominant in college was almost impossible to find. And the window that he worked so hard to keep open eventually closed. Now, I know what you guys are all thinking. He must not be playing basketball anymore, right? Wrong. When the NBA stopped calling, he didn't quit. Instead, he played in Turkey, Israel, Taiwan, a shooting stretch in Brooklyn, a strong run in the G League. There were flashes of the UNLV version of him, glimpses of a player who still had something left. Every time he tried to rebuild, his past followed him. His physical limitations followed him. His draft label followed him louder than anything he did on the court. And that is the painful truth about Anthony Bennett. He wasn't just a bust. He was a young man crushed by expectations that never matched who he was as a player and what he needed to succeed. People laughed at his career. They never realized how much he fought just to stay afloat. They never realized how many things went wrong before he ever touched an NBA court. They never realized how heavy that #1 pick label really was. Fast forward to today, Bennett still plays overseas. He still trains. He still loves the game. If there's one word that defines Anthony Bennett's journey, it's not failure, it's pressure. Pressure shaped his draft night. Pressure shaped his career. Pressure shaped how the world judged him before he ever had a fair shot. And pressure is what makes his story one of the most tragic chapters in modern draft history.
With the second pick, the Orlando Magic select Victor Oladipo of Indiana University.
After the shock of the first pick, the draft finally settled into something that made sense. This was the type of player that teams understood. Oladipo wasn't a gamble. At Indiana, he became one of the best two-way guards in the country. He arrived there as an unranked recruit with no major hype, but he left as a player who built himself up brick by brick. His athleticism was elite, his effort was constant, and the jump he made between his sophomore and junior seasons turned heads everywhere. Orlando saw someone who can become the heartbeat of a rebuilding franchise. His rookie year flashed exactly that: energy, defense, and a stubbornness that made him impossible to ignore. He was raw offensively, but you could see the potential in how hard he played and how much he cared.
Cross court, Oladipo cannot find an opening, now fires. He got it! He drilled it! We're going to another overtime!
The early years of his career were about searching. Orlando tried him as a point guard, then off the ball, then swapped coaches, systems, and rosters around him. Nothing stuck long enough to build real stability, so they moved him to Oklahoma City. And he played really well next to Westbrook, but it was clear he needed his own runway. He needed a place where he could finally define who he was supposed to be. That place ended up being right back in Indiana. The moment Oladipo arrived with the Pacers, everything about his game sharpened. He looked lighter, faster, and more confident. He attacked the rim with purpose, shot the ball with conviction, and defended like every possession mattered. mattered. That first year with the Pacers became the peak of his career. He looked like a player completely locked into who he was supposed to be. He averaged 23 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and led the entire league with 2.5 steals per game. But the numbers only tell you a part of the story. What made that season unforgettable was the way that he took over games, the confidence he played with, and the feeling that Indiana suddenly had a true franchise star. And the defining moment of that peak came in the 2018 playoffs when Indiana matched up with LeBron's Cavaliers. Nobody expected the Pacers to hang around, let alone control stretches of that series. But Oladipo played with a fearlessness that made it feel like the script had flipped. He carried Indiana to a Game 7 and made huge plays in the clutch. He forced Cleveland to fight for every inch. And even though Indiana didn't win that series, Oladipo walked out of it looking like a legitimate franchise star. And then the injuries hit. What happened next wasn't just a slump. It was a collapse brought on by the kind of setbacks that steal years from players. That torn quad changed everything. His explosiveness faded, and so did his stability on the court. He tried to play through it, then re-injured it again. Every attempt at a comeback took a little more out of him. Indiana eventually moved on. Houston tried, and then Miami tried. And both teams got short but powerful flashes of that old version of him. Moments that reminded people why he looked like the future of the Pacers. Every time he had built momentum, his body pushed back. What made Oladipo's story painful is that his decline didn't happen at the end of his career. It happened right in the middle of it, at the point where most stars find their prime. One wrong injury changed his entire trajectory. But Oladipo never fully walked away. Even after the injuries piled up and opportunities in the league dried out, he refused to let the story end there. He took his game overseas for stretches, using those environments to build his confidence back and rhythm without the constant pressure of the NBA spotlight. Those years became a reset button, a chance to focus on his body, rework his foundation. Eventually, he returned to the United States and joined the G League, not as a former star cashing in on his name, but as a player willing to rebuild everything from the ground up. And in that setting, he didn't look washed. He looked hungry. He's been putting together complete games, including triple doubles and high impact performances that reminded people he still has the intelligence, competitiveness, and skills to contribute to a winning team. He became a veteran presence in a league full of players chasing the same dream he's chasing again. He's still in the NBA gyms. He's still handling rehab, conditioning, and long hours of training. And you can feel that same edge he had during his Indiana peak. The same fight that helped him climb from an unranked recruit to an all-NBA guard. Oladipo isn't back in the NBA just yet, but he's much closer than people think. And the only reason he's even in this position is because he refused to give up on himself. At the end of the day, Victor Oladipo didn't become a champion. He didn't get the long, uninterrupted prime that he had earned, but he did become a 2-time All-Star and an all-NBA guard. And for a brief moment, he was one of the most dangerous two-way players in basketball. If Bennett was pressure, then Oladipo was resilience. His entire career became a test of how many hits a player can take while still finding a way to stand back up.
I don't think there's anyone who can handle more pain than I can, I promise you.
Quick side note, if you guys are enjoying the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. It would really help me reach our goal of 100,000 subs. Also, make sure you guys go subscribe to our brand new podcast channel, Jay-Z Courtside. That, as well as our Twitch streams, Twitter, and Discord server will all be linked down below in the description. Back to the video.
With the third pick, the Washington Wizards select Otto Porter Jr.
This is one of the least surprising moments of the entire lottery. He wasn't projected to be a superstar, but he was considered to be one of the safest players left on the board. Everything about him suggested reliability. At Georgetown, Porter became the kind of player coaches dreamt of. Steady, efficient, disciplined, and smart. He didn't force the game. He read it. And with every season he spent there, he sharpened that exact reputation. Porter was a late bloomer who developed into the Big East Player of the Year and a consensus All-American by doing all the little things at a high level. He defended multiple positions, rebounded with effort, and played with a calmness that stood out in college basketball. Washington didn't draft him to be a savior. They drafted him because he had the tools to slide right into a young core built around John Wall and Bradley Beal. His rookie year was not memorable. He struggled with injuries, played limited minutes, and never found a rhythm. But unlike Anthony Bennett, Porter didn't have the pressure of carrying a franchise. He had the time, and once that time arrived, he took advantage of it. By his third and fourth seasons, Porter had carved out a role as one of the league's most efficient complementary wings. He shot at an elite clip from three, defended at a high level, and filled in every gap Washington needed filled. He wasn't flashy, but he was effective. He became the glue between Wall's speed and Beal's scoring. And at his peak, he was one of the most reliable two-way role players in the league. The 2016-17 season was his turning point. Washington made a deep playoff run, pushed Boston to 7 games, and for long stretches, Porter was the team's most consistent presence. He knocked down shots, defended the bigger wings, crashed the glass, and made every small play a contender needs to stay alive. That run turned him into one of the most valuable restricted free agents in the NBA. So after all that hype, Brooklyn offered him a massive contract, and Washington matched it. That deal changed everything. With big money comes bigger expectations, and Porter's time in Washington slowly shifted from promising to complicated. He dealt with injuries, nagging pain, and long stretches of inconsistency. The flashes were still there, especially when he played free and healthy, but those stretches became fewer as the injuries injuries piled up. His peak seasonal averages were around 15 points and 6.5 rebounds per game.
Otto Porter's jumper. How about that to end a brilliant first half for Washington?
Eventually, Washington traded him to Chicago. And in Chicago, we got another reminder of how good he could be when his body cooperated. He became a veteran presence in that locker room, but the injuries never fully let up, and his time in Chicago was defined by brief bursts of productivity followed by long stretches on the sideline. His journey continued through Orlando and then to Golden State, where his story took a late career turn almost nobody expected. Porter joined the Warriors at the exact moment they needed a steady, reliable forward who understood how to play within a system built on movement and trust. And in that role, he became far more important than anyone ever predicted. During the Warriors' 2022 title run, Porter gave them exactly what their roster had been missing. He defended multiple positions, rebounded in traffic, and spaced the floor at a level that mattered in high-pressure moments. He shot 40% from 3 in the playoffs, and those timely shots helped stabilize lineups whenever the Warriors needed a boost. He wasn't a headliner, but he was one of those glue pieces championship teams rely on far more than the box score ever shows. He even started games in the finals, held his own guarding bigger wings, and hit momentum threes that shifted the rhythm of that series. For a team chasing its return to the top, Porter Jr. provided experience, calmness, and reliability. And without him, the Warriors don't win that championship the same way.
Yeah, 4 teams in 9 years to get to this moment is nothing short of amazing.
After that title run, Porter signed with the Toronto Raptors hoping to extend the second act of his career. But once again, his body had different plans. He played only a handful of games before undergoing a season-ending surgery. The kind of setback that doesn't just slow a career down, it can bring one to a stop. Toronto later moved him to Utah, but by then the injuries had caught up to him. He never suited up for the Jazz, and the window that had once felt wide open slowly closed. Porter walked away from the NBA quietly. Just a simple announcement in March of 2024 where he admitted that his body wasn't allowing him to play the game at the level he expected from himself. After 11 seasons, he chose to step away on his own terms. Since then, Otto Porter Jr. has kept a low profile. He hasn't rushed into media gigs or coaching roles. He's shifted into a quieter phase of his life, focusing on family and life beyond the league. Fitting for a player who spent his career impacting the game in subtle, steady ways rather than just chasing the spotlight. He never became a superstar. He never became an all-star. But he did build a long NBA career through intelligence, efficiency, and discipline. And he ended up walking away with something most players never get: the experience of playing a key role on a championship team. If Oladipo was resilience, then Porter Jr. was reliability. His entire career was defined by consistency, by fitting into whatever a team needed, and by finding ways to impact games even when the spotlight wasn't directly aimed at him.
With the 4th pick, the Charlotte Bobcats select Cody Zeller from Indiana University.
Charlotte drafted Cody Zeller because they knew exactly what they were getting with him. He wasn't a mystery prospect. At Indiana, he had been one of the most polished big men in the country. He ran the floor, finished well, rebounded with consistency, and played with a level of discipline that made him easy to plug into almost any system. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable. Indiana leaned on him heavily. He averaged double-digit points in both seasons, shot an efficient percentage around the rim, and helped carry the program through its resurgence. He was strong enough to score inside, but mobile enough to switch and run with the guards, which made him exactly the kind of center NBA teams felt comfortable investing in. When Charlotte made the pick, they weren't drafting a star. They were drafting stability, and that's exactly what Zeller gave them. His rookie year showed signs of a player who understood the pace of the NBA quickly. He didn't put up gaudy numbers, but he played his role and did all the little things that keep lineups functioning. Over the next several seasons, Zeller became a fixture for the Hornets. He never broke out as an all-star candidate or a top scoring option, but he did grow into a reliable starting center. When healthy, he ran the floor with purpose, protected the rim at a respectable level, and made an impact through effort rather than just highlight plays. His best stretch came around the 2016-17 season, where he played some of the smartest, most efficient basketball of his career and helped Charlotte become a competitive, physical team.
Oh my! Cody Zeller! What a start for the Hornets!
The issue was unfortunately availability. Zeller battled injuries throughout his time in Charlotte, missing large chunks of multiple seasons. Whenever he would return, he found ways to contribute, but the stops and starts kept him from building true momentum. Eventually, he moved on, signing short-term deals with Portland and later with Miami, where he carved out depth minutes and brought veteran stability to the rotations. His short run with the Heat in 2023 stood out. He backed up Bam Adebayo during their finals run and gave Miami solid relief minutes in a playoff environment that demanded toughness and composure. He was not a difference maker, but he was exactly what a contender needed from a veteran big: effort, communication, and a willingness to play physical basketball. As the years passed, his opportunities in the league naturally slowed. The big man position continued to evolve, and with younger centers entering the league and staying healthier, Zeller gradually fell out of the consistent rotation cycle. By 2023-24, he found himself bouncing between short deals and limited roles. The NBA quietly moved on without him, and Zeller didn't make a dramatic exit. Instead, his career shifted into the background, and he transitioned smoothly into life beyond the court. He spent much of his post-playing life focusing on family and community involvement. particularly back in Indiana where basketball still meant everything to him. Zeller never became a star. He never made an all-star team or collected any major awards, but he did play more than a decade in the NBA, earned respect in every locker room he stepped into, and built a career defined by professionalism and commitment to doing his job at a high level. If Porter Jr. was reliability, then Zeller was steadiness, a player whose value came from consistency, effort, and the kind of dependable presence every team quietly appreciates.
With the 5th pick, the Phoenix Suns select Alex Len.
And let's be real here. The logic behind this pick was obvious. He was 7 feet tall with a soft touch, long arms, and the kind of raw physical tools that NBA teams almost never pass on. At Maryland, Len grew rapidly from a project into a centerpiece and showed flashes of a developing offensive game that convinced scouts that he had the potential to become a two-way anchor. Maryland used him as the focal point in the paint, and he delivered. Phoenix wasn't expecting him to dominate right away. They were drafting him as a long-term investment, a big man that they could mold, a foundation piece for their rebuild. But Len entered the NBA battling ankle issues, and his rookie year never took off. He spent most of it recovering, adjusting to the pace of the league, and trying to establish a consistent role. Once he got healthy, he grew into a dependable rotation big, someone who protected the rim, used his size effectively, and played with more skill than people initially expected. There were stretches in Phoenix where Len looked like he might finally put it all together, and the best example came during the 2016-17 season. In that year, he averaged 8 points and 7 rebounds in limited minutes, showing real signs of growth as a rim protector and interior finisher. It wasn't a star-level peak, but it was the closest he came to fully showcasing the blend of size and mobility that made Phoenix believe in his long-term upside. Eventually, he moved on, looking for a fresh start. Atlanta gave him the clearest runway, and for a while, it worked. Len had some of the most productive stretches of his career. Under Lloyd Pierce's system, he screened well, hit the offensive glass, played tough interior defense, and even worked on adding a three-point shot to keep up with a modern game. But just like in Phoenix, the flashes never fully settled into something permanent. From there, he became the definition of a journeyman big. He had stops in Sacramento, Toronto, Washington, and then back to Sacramento again. In each spot, he filled the same role, a reliable, physical center who could rebound, defend the rim, and give teams quality minutes. Coaches valued him for his toughness. Teammates valued him for his professionalism and effort. In the later years of his career, Len leaned heavily into the veteran role. He became a stabilizer for young teams, especially in Sacramento, where he provided leadership and physicality off of the bench. And while he never fully broke out, he always found a way to be useful. He wasn't putting up any big scoring nights, but he did play meaningful minutes in playoff pushes and earned the trust of multiple coaching staffs along the way. As of now, Len remains active in the NBA ecosystem. He's continued to secure short-term contracts, serve as a veteran backup, and stay ready for any team that may need size, experience, and a dependable presence in the locker room. He also plays for the Ukrainian national team and has been vocal about representing his country proudly during a turbulent time. Off the court, he's taken on more community and charity work, focusing especially on helping families and children affected by the war in Ukraine. It became a meaningful part of his life beyond basketball. So no, Alex Len did not become a star. He never made an all-star team or collected any major accolades, but he did build more than a decade-long career as a steady, respected center, the kind of big man every roster quietly needs. If Zeller was steadiness, then Len was endurance. His career wasn't about peaks. It was about lasting, adapting, and finding ways to stay valuable year after year.
With the 6th pick, the New Orleans Pelicans select Nerlens Noel from the University of Kentucky.
When Noel's name was called, it felt like less a pick and more like a gamble on potential. He had the frame, the instincts, the defensive timing scouts drooled over. At Kentucky, Noel didn't just block shots, he erased possessions. He moved like a guard, covered ground like a wing, and anchored the paint like a franchise center in the making. Before his ACL injury, he was widely projected to go number 1. That injury changed everything. Instead of being the safe pick, Noel became the question mark of the draft.
Whoever gets you from this point on, you gotta steal. So don't even worry.
Philadelphia took the swing anyway, betting that once he recovered, he could become their defensive backbone of the future. And right away, his rookie year became a redshirt season. No games, no stats, just rehab and patience. The real beginning came the next year, and you could see flashes of why he was so highly regarded. Noel's rookie season was raw, but it was promising. He averaged 10 points and 8 rebounds, and he also finished top 10 in blocks and steals. For a young center, that combination was rare. His mobility, his willingness to defend on the perimeter, and his shot blocking instincts made him one of the most disruptive young defenders in the league. But Noel entered the NBA at the exact moment the league had been shifting away from that kind of center who struggled with spacing, shooting, and offensive creation. His game was built on athleticism and defense, not touch, not shooting, and not post scoring. Philadelphia kept stockpiling bigs, from Embiid to Okafor to Holmes. The front court logjam blurred his role, and Noel eventually became the odd man out, and his development stalled. Dallas gave him his next chance, and for a brief stretch, he looked like he'd found a perfect situation. He ran the floor, protected the rim, and fit Rick Carlisle's systems very well. His peak in Dallas came during the 2016-17 stretch run where he averaged 8.5 points, 7 rebounds, and nearly 2 steals per game. The Mavericks believed in a ceiling, but negotiations went sideways. So, Noel bet on himself, turned down a long-term deal, and the next season, everything unraveled. Injuries hit, the fit soured, momentum disappeared. From there, Noel's career became a series of short stops. Oklahoma City, New York, Detroit, Brooklyn. And in OKC and New York in particular, he rebuilt his value as a defensive specialist. With the Knicks, he had one of the best defensive seasons of his career, anchoring Tom Thibodeau's scheme and making life miserable for opposing bigs.
Almost a forced turnover by the Knicks.
Siakam rejected by Noel. That's his 4th block.
But the injuries kept on coming, and each setback took a little bit more spring out of his legs. By the time he reached Detroit and later Sacramento, Noel was no longer projected as a starter. He became a veteran stopgap, a defensive presence teams trusted in short bursts but couldn't lean on long term. His body simply didn't allow him to play the way he once did. When the NBA opportunities thinned out, Noel did what a lot of former elite prospects do. He stepped away quietly and focused on rebuilding his health. He hasn't filed retirement papers. His life after the NBA has been more grounded. He never became the franchise-changing center people once imagined. He didn't make an all-star team or collect any awards, but at his best, he was one of the most disruptive defensive players in his class, a shot-blocking force who changed games with his timing and instincts. If Len was endurance, then Noel was potential, a player with a sky-high ceiling, but a career shaped by injuries, timing, and the unforgiving evolution of the modern-day NBA.
With the 7th pick, the Sacramento Kings select Ben McLemore from the University of Kansas.
Man, I remember this pick like it was yesterday. It felt like Sacramento had found the scoring guard they'd been searching for years. Coming out of Kansas, McLemore had some of the cleanest shooting mechanics in the college game. He was electric in transition, smooth pulling off the dribble, and flashed the type of athleticism that made scouts think he could become a high-level two-way guard. He looked like a future star. He averaged over 15 points per game and played with a fluidity that made everything look effortless.
Get your cameras ready.
He wasn't just good, he looked the part. The comparisons were lofty, and the expectations were even higher. But entering the NBA as a raw scorer on a franchise with no stability is one of the fastest ways to derail a young player's development. Sacramento went through different coaches and backcourt partners almost every season. McLemore never got the consistency he needed. His rookie year had moments of real promise, including stretches where he looked confident attacking the rim and shooting off movement. But as the seasons went on, his role shifted constantly. Starter one week, bench the next. Defensive focus one game, scoring focus the next. This instability never gave him a foundation to grow from. McLemore had the talent. What he didn't have was structure. His peak came during the 2014-15 season, where he averaged around 12 points with improved efficiency and showed flashes of being the dynamic scorer Sacramento had hoped for. But the breakout never arrived. And then there was that dunk contest. Fans remember it not for the highlights, but for the awkward, drawn-out theatrics and a performance that just didn't land. It wasn't embarrassing enough to define his career, but it definitely became one of those moments that we joked about. It added to the narrative that McLemore had the athleticism, but never fully put the pieces together on the biggest stages. After Sacramento, his career took on a new identity. He bounced around, signing with Memphis, then returning to Sacramento, and then eventually landed in Houston. And that stop with the Rockets became the closest thing to a revival. Playing next to James Harden in a system built on spacing and threes, McLemore found his rhythm again. He knocked down catch-and-shoot threes, ran the floor, and became an impactful role player during Houston's playoff runs.
Good pass to McLemore. He got it! What a pass cross-court to McLemore!
For a stretch in 2019-2020, he averaged 10 points per game on strong shooting splits and reminded everyone that he still had a real scoring ability. The issue for him was consistency. The highs came and went, and the lows lasted longer than he could afford. As younger guards entered the league and teams leaned heavier into versatile defenders, McLemore gradually slipped out of the NBA rotation cycle. He had brief stints with the Lakers and Trailblazers, showing flashes again, but never enough to secure a long-term spot. And when there were no more opportunities in the NBA, McLemore went overseas, and that turned into a second wind. He played in China and later in Europe, where he embraced a scoring role again, this time without the weight of NBA systems or expectations. He rediscovered the confidence that made him a star at Kansas. Off the court, McLemore has grown into a more mature presence.
Not really. Yikes.
He didn't become a franchise player. He didn't become the star many projected, but he did carve out nearly a decade in the NBA, reinvented himself multiple times, and built a strong second act overseas. If Noel was potential, then McLemore was promise, a player with all the tools to shine, but whose career unfolded in ways talent alone couldn't control.
With the 8th pick, the Detroit Pistons select Kentavious Caldwell-Pope from the University of Georgia.
I'll never forget being in Disney World watching Detroit make this pick. I was jumping around in the hotel lobby screaming at my dad that the Pistons found their future guard. Coming out of Georgia, He had a clean jumper, long arms, a competitive streak on defense, and a frame that looked built for the modern NBA. He wasn't the loudest prospect in the class, but he carried himself like someone who knew how to do the job right away. And in Detroit, he steadily earned that respect. The scoring didn't explode right away, but the effort was undeniable. KCP defended like he was trying to earn his minutes every possession. He chased shooters over screens, fought through contact, and played with a motor that quickly made him a fan favorite. His three-point shot developed year by year, and as he got more responsibility, he stepped into it without hesitation. For Pistons fans, aka me, it felt like he was on the verge of becoming the long-term answer at shooting guard, especially during that 2015-16 run. In the playoff series against Cleveland, when Detroit faced LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, KCP didn't back down. He chased Kyrie relentlessly, hit big shots, and played with a confidence that made it look like he was ready to take that next leap. I couldn't help but think, this guy might be a part of our core for the next decade.
In the rebound, ahead is Caldwell-Pope, perfect pass, and a flush!
That fast break dunk led by KCP had the Palace rocking. He had nights where he looked like the future. Detroit didn't have many bright spots during those years, but KCP was one of them. He felt like a building block, but his development stalled just enough to make Detroit hesitate. His offensive ceiling never rose much higher, and the Pistons, stuck between rebuild and retool, eventually let him walk. That decision changed everything for him. His next chapter came in Los Angeles, and for KCP, it was the perfect environment. Later surrounded by LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and a roster built on defensive toughness, he thrived in the role that he was built for. He didn't have to create, he had to finish, defend, and stay ready. And he delivered exactly that. His shooting spiked, his defensive impact sharpened, and in the Lakers' 2020 championship run, he was one of the most important players on the entire roster. And Laker fans still talk about how reliable he was during that run. And then came Denver, and somehow his resume got even stronger. Playing next to Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, he became the ideal role player in a system built on movement and unselfishness. His shooting hit new levels, especially because Jokic's gravity gave him some of the cleanest looks of his entire career. In the Nuggets' 2023 title run, he hit huge threes, guarded elite wings, and brought championship equity to a team that needed exactly his type of presence. 2 rings, 2 contenders, 2 times proving he was one of the NBA's premier 3-and-D veterans. But when he left Denver, the conversation around him shifted. Orlando fans quickly realized that part of what made KCP so efficient was the spacing and star power around him. Without LeBron or Jokic pulling defenders towards the paint, his 3-point shooting percentage dipped. And now in Memphis, his efficiency has hit a career low, with his scoring and shooting both falling off significantly as age and wear start to creep in. His defensive instincts are still there, but the speed isn't the same, and the legs don't spring the way they used to. That's the natural transition for most veterans, especially wings who guarded the other team's best perimeter player for over a decade. Those miles eventually start adding up. But even now, KCP still carries something rare: credibility. He's one of the few players from his draft with a championship resume, and he played real roles in both those runs. That counts for something. He hasn't retired, but he's clearly moved into the late career stage. Shorter stints, smaller roles, fewer minutes. What hasn't changed is the professionalism. He's still in the gym, still defending, still knocking down open shots, sometimes, still trying to squeeze every last bit out of a career defined by work ethic and adapting. He never became a franchise star, but he did become one of the most valuable role players of his era, a 2-time champion, and the most successful non-Giannis player from this entire draft. If McLemore was promise, then KCP was impact, a guard who understood exactly what winning basketball required.
With the 9th pick, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Trey Burke from the University of Michigan.
Utah selected Trey Burke after watching him light college basketball on fire for 2 straight seasons. Burke wasn't just good at Michigan, he was absurd. He played with a swagger that made every game feel like a show, and he became the heartbeat of a Wolverines team that captured the entire country's attention. His sophomore season was the stuff of legend. Burke controlled the tempo and played with a pace that made Michigan's offense hum. And then came the shot.
Burke moves it down. 5 seconds, fires for 3, and the game is tied!
The iconic deep 3 against Kansas in the 2013 NCAA tournament. A pull-up from way behind the arc that saved Michigan's seasons and instantly became one of the most replayed highlights in college basketball history. The Wolverines reached the national championship game. Burke won the National Player of the Year, and his draft stock skyrocketed. Utah traded up because they believed that they were getting their point guard of the future. His early NBA career showed flashes of exactly that. Burke's rookie season was his best stretch in Utah, where he averaged 13 points and 6 assists, and carried himself with the same confidence he had at Michigan. He won some Rookie of the Year votes, and looked like a guy who could grow into a long-term starter. But the jump from college star to NBA lead guard is steep, and Burke's game hit that reality hard. His size made it difficult to finish at the rim. Defensively, he struggled to stay in front of bigger, stronger guards. As Utah's roster evolved with players like Gordon Hayward and Rudy Gobert taking on larger roles, Burke's place in the offense became less defined. He moved to Washington next, and in small spurts looked revitalized. But then came New York, where he had his best NBA stretch since his rookie year. Playing for the Knicks, Burke had nights that felt like Michigan all over again. His 2017-18 run with New York brought some real excitement back to his name, especially after he dropped 42 points in a game that reminded everyone exactly what he was capable of when he got into his rhythm. But the NBA changed quickly around him. Teams wanted bigger guards who could defend multiple positions and shoot threes at volume. He bounced through teams: Dallas, Philly, back to Dallas, and each spot brought a few high-scoring nights, followed by the same spacing and defensive challenges that held him back in Utah. Eventually, the NBA stopped calling consistently, and overseas, he thrived, putting up big games and playing with a freedom he hadn't felt since Michigan. He could attack, create, and lead without being asked to fit into a small, predetermined role, all while still staying ready for an NBA opportunity that might open up again. He hasn't formally retired, but he has transitioned into the second act of his career, one built on passion for the game rather than just chasing rosters. He didn't become the franchise point guard that people had hoped for. He didn't make an all-star team or collect any awards, but he gave us one of the greatest college runs of the modern era, produced unforgettable moments at the NBA level, and carved out a long, respected career built on skill, competitiveness, and heart. If KCP was impact, then Trey Burke was belief, a player who made you believe anything could happen when the ball was in his hands, even if the NBA journey didn't unfold the way it once looked like it would.
With the 10th pick, Portland Trailblazers select C.J. McCollum from Lehigh University.
C.J. McCollum wasn't the typical lottery pick. He didn't come from a powerhouse school, and he wasn't a one-and-done freshman. He came from Lehigh, a program most fans only heard of because C.J. had single-handedly torched Duke in one of the biggest March Madness upsets ever. That was the moment the world learned who he was. Portland believed in him early but had to wait. His rookie year was delayed by injury, and he had to fight for minutes behind Damian Lillard, Wesley Matthews, and Nicholas Batum. But once he finally got his shot, he didn't hesitate. He stepped onto the floor like he belonged there. And before long, it was obvious that Portland had struck gold. His real breakout came in the 2015-16 season. That was the year McCollum averaged 21 points per game, won most improved player, and established himself as one of the most skilled shot creators in the NBA. His footwork was elite, his three-point shooting was deadly, and his pairing with Damian Lillard became the heart of one of the most resilient backcourts in modern NBA history. For years, Dame and CJ became synonymous with belief. They weren't a super team, they were a homegrown, undersized guards who kept pushing against the odds. CJ was the counterpunch to Lillard's explosive scoring. When teams blitzed Dame, CJ punished them with patience and precision, and saved Portland in more than a few playoff games. Their 2019 Western Conference Finals run was the peak of that partnership, and CJ's Game 7 performance against Denver is still one of the greatest games of this era.
I got it out the mud. I went to Lehigh University. You know what I'm saying? No one's ever been drafted from there before, so for me, it's just about showing what I can do every night and keeping the door open for the next mid-major.
But after years of trying to break through, Portland eventually restarted. CJ was traded to New Orleans in 2022, and instead of fading into the background, he adjusted again. He became a steadying force for the Pelicans, a veteran guard who could still drop 20 when needed, but also guide young stars like Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. His peak in New Orleans came during the 2022-23 stretch, where he averaged 21 points while playing both on and off the ball. He filled whatever role the team needed. Primary scorer one night, secondary playmaker the next, locker room leader every day. And now in Washington, McCollum stands as one of the two veterans guiding a rebuilding roster, alongside Chris Middleton. And in a situation where a lot of players might check out, CJ is still sharp, still focused, and still playing the right way. He's embraced being the guy younger teammates can lean on, and the example in practice. What makes CJ's story unique among this draft class is that he's not done. His game has always been built on skill, not athleticism, and that ages well in the NBA. He can still score, he can still run an offense, and if he ever landed back on a playoff contender, he could still swing a game or two of a series as a spark plug guard who lives for big moments. He never became a superstar, never won a title, but he became an all-star level scorer for years. A most improved player, one of the most respected leaders in the league, and a blueprint for how to carve out a real career through skill, toughness, and IQ. If Burke was belief, then McCollum was craft, a player who mastered the art of scoring and used that mastery to build one of the most impressive careers in this entire draft class.
With the 11th pick, the Philadelphia 76ers select Michael Carter-Williams from Syracuse University.
When Philly drafted Michael Carter-Williams, most people saw him as a long-term project, a tall, skinny point guard from Syracuse with great length, great instincts, and a shaky jumper. He wasn't the safest pick. He wasn't the flashiest either, but he had tools. And in Philly, deep in the process, had all the time in the world to see what those tools could truly become. And nobody expected what happened next. His debut wasn't just good, it was historic. 22 points, 12 assists, 9 steals, and 7 rebounds in his first ever game. Against a championship contender, against LeBron James. It was the type of performance that forced the league to stop and reset their expectations overnight. I am not exaggerating when I say this. Everyone and their mothers players were talking about Michael Carter-Williams that rookie year. Triple doubles, big scoring nights, wild stat lines across the board. MCW wasn't just good. He looked like the next blueprint for tall, do-everything point guards. People weren't talking about Giannis. They were talking about him. Magic Johnson comparisons weren't jokes. They were conversations analysts and fans were genuinely having together. And when he won Rookie of the Year, it felt deserved. It felt earned. It felt like Philadelphia had stolen a star at pick 11. But as you all know, the NBA is never short of reality checks. As defenses scouted him more, his weaknesses became harder to hide. His jumper never developed. Teams went under screens. The spacing around him collapsed. The turnovers crept up. Opponents baited him into taking shots that he wasn't comfortable taking. And the Sixers, committed to a long rebuild, decided to move him sooner than anyone ever expected. When he was traded to Milwaukee, it shocked fans because it felt like Philly was giving up on a rising star. But inside front offices, doubts had started to form. His size was elite. His vision was good, but without a consistent jumper, MCW had to be perfect at everything else, and perfection is impossible in this league. In Milwaukee, his role shifted. He handled the ball less, had fewer driving lanes. The athleticism was still there, but the efficiency wasn't. Chicago gave him another shot, hoping a change of scenery could recreate the magic. But once again, the lack of shooting made it difficult to build an offense around him. After that, his career moved into the journeyman phase. Charlotte, Houston, Orlando. He reinvented himself in Orlando as a defensive spark and energetic bench guard. For a stretch, he carved out a real role by embracing the gritty things. He wasn't the Rookie of the Year version of himself anymore, but he was still a pro who could make life difficult for opposing guards. Unfortunately for MCW, the injuries piled up, his minutes dipped, and eventually the NBA stopped calling. Not because he didn't belong, but because the league around him changed at a pace his game never fully caught up to. But here's the truth fans often overlook. Michael Carter-Williams lived a dream that very few people ever touch. He had a Rookie of the Year for ages that we still talk about. He made history. He won an NBA award that players spend their entire lives chasing. He lasted nearly a decade in the league, and he did it through reinvention, humility, and work. His post-NBA life shifted into a quieter chapter. He didn't become the superstar people thought he might be in year one. He didn't become the next Magic, but he did become a professional, a respected veteran, and a reminder of how unpredictable the NBA journey can be. If McCollum was craft, then MCW was surprise. A player who shocked the league with a debut for the ages, climbed higher than anyone ever expected, and then fought to stay afloat long after the spotlight had moved on.
And what a debut for Michael Carter-Williams.
With the 12th pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Steven Adams from Rotorua, New Zealand.
Steven Adams wasn't viewed as a finished product. He was raw, incredibly strong, and already one of the most physical, imposing athletes in the draft. But what people didn't fully understand yet was that Adams would grow into the heartbeat in one of the most competitive Western Conference teams of the decade. He wasn't just a center, he became an identity. His early years in OKC were defined by toughness. He fought for every inch of space. His screens knocked players over. His box out cleared space for stars. And from the moment he earned real minutes next to Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, it became obvious that he was built for playoff basketball.
And I think Adams is talking to Westbrook about missing the free throw.
Misses, gets the rebound. Back out Westbrook. Bang! Russell Westbrook from just inside half court.
Adams perfected the dirty work that rarely shows up in highlights but wins real games. He protected the paint without needing flash. He embraced contact like he enjoyed it. And of all his gifts, one stood above the rest. He became arguably the greatest offensive rebounder in NBA history. Whether it was his timing, his strength, or his refusal to be moved, he consistently created second chance opportunities that demoralized his opponents. Ask any OKC fan from that era. Adams grabbing an offensive rebound in a crowd felt like a guaranteed extra possession. It was a superpower. The peak Adams experience was during the 2016 playoffs. He battled the Spurs. He stood toe-to-toe with the 73-win Warriors. Even when Golden State adjusted their entire scheme to keep him off the glass, he kept coming back, possession after possession. That postseason cemented him as one of the best role-playing bigs of the decade. After Durant left, Adams became even more important. He formed an elite two-man connection with Westbrook. The screens, the putbacks, the little things that fueled Westbrook's MVP year. Adams carried a workload that only a handful of centers could handle, and he did it without an ego. He never cared about touches. He cared about impact. But time and injuries eventually reshaped the franchise. Adams moved on, first to New Orleans, then Memphis, and in Memphis, he became a culture piece. Ja Morant and that young core fed off of Adams' presence. He anchored their defense, controlled the glass, and mentally toughened the entire roster. When Adams was on the floor, Memphis looked like a contender. When he was injured, everything fell apart. That alone shows you his value.
Adams going long. Morant.
then when everyone thought it was over, his next chapter came in Houston, one that might end up being the perfect final act of his career. Adams joined the Rockets team led by Alperen Şengün, and now with Kevin Durant and a strong supporting cast creating a legitimate path to a title. And Adams isn't there to sit at the end of the bench. He's there to be a stabilizer, a leader, a physical presence, a guy who does the work that nobody else wants to do, a veteran whose voice carries weight. He gives Houston something they didn't have, an enforcer who sets the tone with strength, rebounding, and toughness. In a playoff series, those things change outcomes. Adams might not fill the box score anymore, but he impacts possessions, chemistry, and confidence. If Houston wins it all, he'll be a huge reason why. His game has always aged well because it was never built on speed or scoring. It was built on strength, positioning, and a mindset that every possession is a battle worth fighting. Adams still has something left to give, and the Rockets know it. He never became an All-NBA player or a centerpiece of an offense, but he became something just as valuable. A foundational teammate, a culture setter, a player whose presence elevated stars and stabilized locker rooms. If MCW was surprise, then Steven Adams was foundation, a center who didn't just play the game, but shaped the identity of every team he touched through toughness and a mastery of the grind that wins playoff basketball.
With the 13th pick, the Dallas Mavericks select Kelly Olynyk.
Kelly Olynyk entered the league as one of the most skilled bigs in the draft. At Gonzaga, he reinvented himself into a versatile inside-out scorer who could stretch the floor, put the ball on the deck, and make smart reads as a passer. Boston drafted him because he fit the new wave of big men, mobile, intelligent, and comfortable operating beyond the arc. His Celtics years had ups and downs, but he brought real value. He wasn't a traditional center, and he wasn't just a stretch big either. He had a weird, creative game that rewarded teams willing to give him freedom. Unfortunately for Kelly, a lot of fans remember him for one moment instead of the full body of work. The play in the 2015 playoffs when he tangled with Kevin Love and dislocated Love's shoulder. Fair or not, that moment became one of the defining images attached to his name. It overshadowed the fact that he was actually a productive rotation big who can fit in almost any offense because of his shooting and feel for the game. His best stretch came in Miami, where he averaged 13.5 points per game during the 2017-18 season. That was peak Olynyk. Coaches always appreciated him more than the fans did because he made the right reads, played unselfishly, and gave you real lineup flexibility. He went on to have some pretty solid stints in Houston, Detroit, and Utah, shifting between starter and veteran presence depending on what each team needed. Even as his athleticism plateaued, his shooting and IQ kept him relevant for years. Now in San Antonio, his role has shifted again. With Wembanyama rising into superstardom and Luke Kornet joining the rotation, Olynyk doesn't see the floor as much. Instead, he's become a trusted locker room voice, a veteran who can mentor young players, help stabilize practices, and give the Spurs a smart, experienced presence behind the scenes. It's quieter work, but it's meaningful. He was never a star, never an all-NBA player, never the type of big who dominated a box score, but he did carve out a long NBA career by adapting, stretching the floor, and understanding how to elevate the players around him. If Adams was foundation, then Olynyk was versatility, a big man who could slide into almost any system and make it function just a little bit smoother, even if he never got the appreciation that he deserved.
With the 14th pick, the Utah Jazz select Shabazz Muhammad.
With this pick, Wolves fans thought they were getting a future two-way star. In college at UCLA, he was a physical wing with a scorer's mindset and a reputation for playing with real intensity. He didn't finesse his way through games. He powered through them. That edge made people believe he could become a big-time NBA wing, someone who could score, defend, and fill the gaps next to Minnesota's young core. His rookie year showed flashes of that promise. He attacked the basket with confidence, ran the floor hard, and played with a strength most first-year wings didn't have. When he came off the bench, there were nights where he looked like a spark plug who could change the momentum of a game instantly. Wolves fans genuinely believed he was on the verge of something. His best season came in 2014-15, where he averaged 13.5 points per game on solid efficiency. He carved out a real role as an energy scorer. For stretches, it looked like everything was trending in the right direction, but the game quickly changed around him. As the league leaned deeper into spacing and switchable defense, Muhammad struggled to keep up. His shooting never became consistent enough to stretch the floor as a full-time wing. His defense didn't develop at the rate the Wolves needed, and once Andrew Wiggins and Zach LaVine took over the wing minutes, Shabazz found himself squeezed out of the rotation. He stayed in Minnesota for several seasons, but the role shrank year by year. Shabazz couldn't quite find a long-term lane to stay in. When the NBA stopped giving him stable opportunities, he went overseas, and that's where his game found a new life. In China, he became a high-volume scorer again. The physical style that didn't fit the NBA's spacing-oriented approach played far better internationally. Basketball in China, the Philippines, and other high-level overseas stops. He had stretches where he put up huge scoring nights and played with the confidence he had back at UCLA. He never filed those retirement papers, but he's transitioned fully into the global basketball world, carving out a long second act far away from the NBA spotlight. He didn't become the elite two-way wing Wolves fans hope for. He didn't grow into a long-term building block, but he fought for his career, reinvented himself overseas, and built a basketball life beyond the league that many players never manage. If Olynyk was versatility, then Shabazz Muhammad was reinvention. A player who didn't become the star fans expected, but still found a way to write a meaningful second chapter on his own terms. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for.
And try to work and become an NBA player.
With the 15th pick, the Milwaukee Bucks select Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Giannis wasn't supposed to be the future of anything. When Milwaukee chose him 15th, most fans didn't know how to pronounce his name. Scouts were also unsure what position he played. Analysts described him as a project, the kind of gamble teams take when every obvious option's already gone. He came into the league as a skinny teenager from Greece with a fascinating story and a frame that you could not take your eyes off of. Milwaukee took a chance on possibility. Everyone else assumed that they were drafting a long-term experiment. And in that rookie year, he didn't shatter expectations. He nudged them. He wasn't overwhelmed by the speed or physicality of the NBA. He played with a curiosity and hunger that made every possession feel like a small step forward. He guarded multiple positions without realizing how rare that was. He crashed the glass with energy. He didn't look like a polished player by any means, but he did look like someone who absorbed everything around him and added it to his game one piece at a time. Year by year, the transformation started to begin. The teenager with narrow shoulders turned into a physical marvel. The tentative driver evolved into a downhill nightmare. The flashes of court vision sharpened into real playmaking. He became stronger, smarter, more confident. Milwaukee didn't just develop him. They slowly built their entire system around his growth. And with every new offseason, he returned as a different version of himself, more refined than the last. Head coach Jason Kidd at the time saw the potential of him being a point forward. And well, they ran with it. By his 4th season, the league started speaking his name with caution. By his 5th season, it wasn't caution anymore. It was fear. That 2016-17 campaign was the moment everything shifted. Giannis averaged 23 points, 9 rebounds, over 5 assists, close to 2 steals, and more than a block per game. He became the first player in franchise history to lead the Bucks in every major stat category. Milwaukee didn't have to imagine what he could become anymore. They were watching it happen in real time. What followed was one of the fastest ascents in league history. He didn't ease into superstardom. He arrived with force. His drives became impossible to stop. His transition attacks turned into highlights before defenses even reacted. And his combination of length, coordination, and power created a style of play the sport had never truly seen. He became an MVP candidate, then an MVP winner, and then he did it again. He added a Defensive Player of the Year. His team won 60 games. Everyone began whispering about his all-time potential. But everything he did before the summer of 2021 became the prelude. The finals were the moment the legend took shape. Milwaukee fell behind 0-2 against a Phoenix team that looked perfectly balanced and perfectly ready. Giannis was coming off of an injury that should have sidelined him for weeks, yet he played through it without any hesitation. He didn't defer. He didn't retreat. He embraced the entire weight of the franchise and demanded the series bend to his will. He delivered performances that felt mythical. 30-point nights, 40-point nights, dominant defense, relentless attacks, moments where he seemed to overpower the sport itself.
Crowded at Bridges up inside, blocked by Antetokounmpo.
And then came Game 6.
The biggest game of his life.
50 points on the biggest night of his life, aggression at the rim, and a level of determination that stripped away every old narrative about whether he could win as a #1 option. He hit his free throws. He made clutch plays. He erased Phoenix confidence possession by possession. When the buzzer sounded, he didn't just win a championship. He ascended. He became a finals MVP. He became the face of a franchise reaching for its first title in 50 years. He became the global symbol of what happens when preparation meets opportunity. For most players, that moment becomes the top of the mountain. For Giannis, it became the beginning of a different sort of pressure. The seasons that followed were filled with dominance that didn't translate into May and June. Milwaukee kept winning regular season games, but the playoff heartbreak returned, sharper each time. In 2022, they battled but fell short without Chris Middleton. In 2024, injuries and instability ripped apart the rhythm that once defined the Bucks. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't about Milwaukee's ceiling, it was about their future. People began the uncomfortable questions. Was Milwaukee wasting the prime of a generational player? How long could Giannis carry a flawed roster? Was Giannis loyal or trapped? He kept producing at a historic level. He added playmaking. He became more efficient in the half court. His jumper, while never perfect, became serviceable enough to punish defenses who disrespected him. But as Chris Middleton aged and injuries piled up, as the Damian Lillard experiment struggled to resemble the Drew Holiday successor replaced, the pressure continued to build. Defenses hunted their weaknesses. Fans debated every trade, and the league watched closely to see whether another disappointing run would push Giannis towards a decision no one in Milwaukee wanted to imagine. Yet through all of it, He remained one of the most unstoppable forces in basketball. He remained the hardest worker in almost every gym he walked into, and he remained the player opponents feared the most when he gathered a full head of steam. He's still growing, still shaping himself into a version of greatness few players in league history ever reach. And that's the part people forget. Giannis is only 30 years old. He still has time. He still has another leap in him. And if he wins another ring, many fans will start placing his name inside the 10 greatest to ever touch a basketball. That's the scale of his legacy. And it all came from a pick no one thought twice about on draft night. He wasn't expected to become this. Not an MVP, not a two-time MVP, not a champion, not a finals MVP, not the face of Greece, not a global icon. But Giannis became all of that. He broke every expectation. He shattered every limitation, and he's still climbing. The journey that started as a long shot has turned into one of the most incredible careers the sport has ever seen. If Shabazz was reinvention, then Giannis Antetokounmpo was evolution. A player who transformed himself year after year and is still pushing towards a legacy that only a handful of names in NBA history can fully understand. And when you look back at this draft now, it almost feels unreal. 14 different players heard their names before Giannis, clearer projections, and far more certainty attached to their futures. Some became solid pros. Some had long careers overseas or found success in roles no one expected. A few even managed to carve out championship moments of their own, but none of them became Giannis. Because this is the twist the NBA never saw coming. The player chosen 15th, the player with no hype and no guaranteed path, became the one who changed the shape of the league forever. He became the one who rose from a prospect to a star, from a star to a champion, from a champion to a global symbol of relentlessness. And that's what makes NBA drafts so beautiful. You can study the film, you can break down the measurements, you can analyze every statistic, you can believe that you understand the future, and still, the game finds ways to humble your certainty. The truth is simple. Potential doesn't follow the script. And it's also to recognize that sometimes the best player in the world can come from a place that nobody expected. 15th pick, unknown kid, global icon. Giannis Antetokounmpo changed everything. And today, every team in the league still lives with a reminder that they had a chance, but passed on him.
Maybe in 15 years, 20 years, maybe my number is up there next to Kareem or Oscar Robinson. I hope I'm there.
So now I'll ask you, what draft do you guys want to see me cover next? Let me know in the comment section down below. Again, guys, be sure to go subscribe to our daily podcast. The link will be down below. It'll be a great way for you to get to know me. Put a face to the voice if you know what I'm saying. If you enjoyed, please, please, please hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you again to MH1 for sponsoring today's video. Also, if you got some extra free time, I think you'll love the videos that are on the screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.